Welcome to our Global Expert Insights program featuring Don Phin. Don is sharing his thoughts on hiring and retaining talent in this crazy economy. Para nuestros amigos en América Latina y España, les damos la bienvenida a nuestro programa de conocimientos expertos con Don Phin. Don comparte sus pensamientos sobre contratación y retención de empleados en esta loca economía. Welcome, Don. Let me introduce him a bit. Don is a sought-after speaker with a national reputation. In fact, when we chatted last week, he was coming back from San Francisco, where he delivered 3 programs in a matter of a day or two. He's held senior human resources positions. He's also an entrepreneur who started, built, and ultimately sold his own company, HR That Works. And it was there that he developed many of the tools he'll be sharing with us today. Don, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and please go a little bit deeper on HR That Works.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. And first of all, welcome to all of you. I'm in today from San Diego, California, but you will hear my New York accent. So I grew up in New York and came out here when I was 20. And I began as an employment law attorney. So I was dealing with the compliance aspects of the employment relationship at the beginning of that kind of, quote, revolution in the United States. And by the time I was 40, I kind of wore out of the litigation scene, and I quit litigation, really realizing nobody wins a lawsuit. And I eventually was doing turnaround work, mostly through what I could see about managing people. The internet came along, and I created a program called HR That Works. I ended up getting about 3,500 companies using that program. And then I sold it to my larger competitor, Think HR. I worked with them for a couple of years in the Silicon Valley area. And since then, I've continued to do my speaking and my coaching of executives. So those are 2 things I do at this age.
Don, you have a passion for the great opportunity that exists for human resources professionals. What are some of the top issues and concerns that these HR folks are facing these days?
I think it's not just the HR folks. I just finished 3 days of my CEO workshops, and every one of them post-pandemic, their businesses have kind of, the demand took off again, right? But they've all been challenged in getting enough people to meet that demand. That's been the number one challenge, and associated with that, getting the folks is the change in the compensation landscape. So all of a sudden, like here in San Diego, Google moves in next door, starts paying its engineers $200,000, where the local firms are paying $150,000. And all of a sudden, nobody wants to work for them anymore. It just out of the blue, and it's something that they didn't plan on, put it that way, right? So as a side note, Jim, one of the things I think that leaders have to do, and I've been talking about this, is that compensation conversation, both with people you're trying to hire and the people you have on board, is a conversation that's uncomfortable for leaders to have. So they've ignored having a conversation. And I think that's a big mistake when it's an elephant in the room. If you don't address the conversation with your workforce and say, here's my plan, I need your help, I need your input so we can turn this thing around, then everybody else will have the conversation for you. Okay. So if you don't step into that void, everybody else's voice comes in there. And I think that's what's happening in a large majority of companies now. The leadership, the ownership, CEO is absent from that conversation right now, which I think is a big mistake. And of course, can lead to some of that turnover stuff that we're so concerned about. So I like to think in order of how things happen. We got to find people, we got to pay them. We want to engage them so that they are productive. And when they're productive, we want to keep them. So that challenge is one every company's having, but it's been accelerated. People may not remember, but before the pandemic, worldwide, there's a labor shortage, right? And it's on the 2 extremes, primarily around a lot of the IT arena. People have to learn these technologies faster. So there's this big learning curve we're all catching up to. And then in the service sector, because it's very hard for people to even afford to live and work in the service sector, So those I see 2 of the bigger challenges.
Don, let's start at that sourcing spot, finding those employees. What are some of the things that you would recommend to not only CEOs, but their HR professionals to enhance their ability or give them a leg up in terms of bringing people on board?
Sure. So the first thing we have to think about is not finding people, but attracting people. It's like a dating game, okay? You're better off trying to attract somebody than go find somebody, right? And so how do we make ourselves attractive as an employer? And the first thing we want to do is have an employer brand. We're always talking about branding when it comes to clients and customers, but you can take any book on branding, cross out the word client, customer, put in the word employee, and learn a lot about what you should do with your own folks, okay? So when I go into companies, at least when majority of people working in the workforce, I wanted to see what the story was. What's the branding of the work experience? Because every environment tells a story and people work within that environment and it motivates them or demotivates them. So I want to see what the story is in that place in terms of both online and at that company. How are they pushing themselves out to people? And before I speak, I always look at companies' websites. And the vast majority of them are horrible when it comes to marketing or branding who we are so that you might be attractive to people, right? So one of the things I suggest is on all hiring websites, you have 3 videos. One from the business owner or CEO or president talking about here's where we're going with this company, because that is the voice people are going to trust more than anybody else for that, because they have more control over that than anybody else. So you got to hear from the CEO. Then what you want to do is people want to know what the environment is like, what it's like to work for this place, especially when you're going down age and people don't have a lot of work experience. They don't know what to expect. We really want to do a day in the life video. Here's what it's like to work here. You go around, and I've seen some awesome, cool day in the life videos. I think you remember my talking about one of this, a company that does tree trimming around utility lines, right? That video was so cool. I geeked out on it and watched it a couple of times. Like, this is cool. So any company has the potential to make a cool video about the work that people do. And that's the one video I might spend a little production money on. Okay. And the third video that you want, and third videos with an S, is testimonials from existing employees, because that's who a potential employee is going to trust more than anybody else. They go to Glassdoor and they go to Indeed to look at your company for a reason. You want to see what the existing employees say. Well, we want our employees to testify about how wonderful the company is. And I would even go so far, if I'm opening up a job in engineering, I'm going to have some of the engineers saying, hey, this is an awesome company. You're going to come work with us, man. Join our team. We look forward to having you on board. So I think both on our websites and our social media sites, we have to do a much better job of using video. I look at the experience. I've got you're our age, Jim, right? And then you go down to my older boys, 42, 43, go down to my 20-year-old. The difference is how much video we've watched. My 20-year-old has learned how to play piano and guitar from video, and a lot of his other learning comes from that, right? So if we're not using video to help attract people, we're missing a big, big, big opportunity, okay?
It's interesting that personally, whenever we try to figure something out, my first stop's usually YouTube. Yeah, we haven't made that transition as business leaders and owners to promote or get the message out. So
that's not our comfort zone, right?
Yep. CEO message, a day in the life, and testimonials from existing employees. Those are the 3 videos at a minimum you think the company should have.
Yes, and a lot of times these applicant tracking systems that are attached to a human resource information system or standalone, the companies might be an ADP website or something like that, and you've got a hiring page. If you've ever looked at those are one of the most boring things you can possibly look at in your life. You got a job on there with a long job description that's not even accurate anymore, and people are going, "Oh, that's really exciting," All right, so imagine doing a dating profile like that.
Yeah.
Okay. There's really no difference in my mind.
When I heard your presentation a few months back to one of our CEO groups, one of my big takeaways was even before some of this, and obviously you'd like to have this in place before you went out trying to attract these people, examining the actual job that you were hiring for was one of my big takeaways. In other words, instead of hiring that sixth salesperson, maybe you break some things down. Why don't you take us through that?
Yeah, no, I love that. One of the things when I ran my company, I didn't want to do is pay $50 an hour people to do $20 an hour work. No, you're paying someone $100,000 a year. You're paying them $50 an hour. How much $20 an hour work do you want them doing? And every individual that I've dealt with, from CEO on down, tells me they're on overwhelm. Almost every single person running for their lives, less people, more pressure, all of this kind of stuff. And if I followed them around, how much $20 an hour work would I catch them doing really well? All right. So let's say you've got 4 or 5 people in a position that's paying $100,000 a year. I'm using this as an example to make so you understand the numbers. You're paying them roughly $50 an hour. Every one of them is doing a bunch of $20 an hour work, complaining that they're on overwhelm. So the person that I would hire is not a 6th person just like them, so they can do $20 an hour work and be on overwhelm. I would hire somebody to do that $20 an hour work and take it away from all of them. So if they switch 2 hours of $20 an hour work with 1 hour of $50 an hour work, they get out of overwhelm and everybody wins. Okay. But most people would much rather be comfortable. They could do that $20 an hour work in their sleep and still claim they're on overwhelm. So I didn't give my employees that choice. I didn't give myself that choice, never mind my employees. All right. So that's the whole business about who we're hiring. Don't hire exactly for the same job description. Hire to take the lowest denominator work away from your existing people, an entry-level type person that you can train for certain skills. They can see how you do things. It's the best way to hire anybody. If you're not hiring a brain surgeon where you have to hire for that skill set, especially if you're hiring somebody in the early part of their career, you hire for their attitude, you hire for their character, and you train for their skills, right? So hire that $20 an hour person and train them up in your way of doing business.
Physician, heal thyself, right? I think there's a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs on this call that might have just kind of squirmed and said, ouch, a little bit, because they themselves may be doing that $20 an hour or
we all are.
$30 an hour work. And if that's the case, maybe
I remember when I was acquired by Think HR, I always had an executive assistant. I was acquired by them in Silicon Valley. The executive assistant thing is not as common. Everybody's so used to doing their own computing stuff. And I'm like, that's really interesting. I can't believe as a CEO, you don't have an executive assistant, as a president, and stuff like that. So they finally I talked them into hiring Debbie for the 3 of them. She's amazing, right? Now I happen to know all 3 of them have executive assistants, right? Because it just makes plain common sense to do that, right? Now, another thing about the hiring that we talked about that I think is the number one way to hire anybody right now is through a robust employee referral program. All right. The number one, I remember going years ago, this guy, Jay Abraham's marketing conference, and I'm just learning about marketing, right? And I'm up in LAX and he's talking about all these different ways and he's talking about different things. And the first thing he talked about was having a great referral program, right? For our businesses. I come back the next year and he says, look, before we get going again, how many of you here last year? Mostly people had their hands up. How many of you have a robust referral program? And everybody's like, that was the first thing he said, the best thing he said. And yet you're coming back wanting to learn more without the doing of the first thing he said, right? Which is a trap. I need more information. I need more information before I can do anything. Man, I don't know any of this stuff. I need more information, right? Which is a trap we can so easily get caught in, right? Especially when we're smart people. So I realized that the single best employee you can hire comes through a referral. They know that person. They know your culture. They know the job to a certain degree. And the thing is, there's fear in referring people. Anytime there's fear out there, you ask, whose judgment is, and what's the judgment is this person concerned about? Well, what happens if you hire somebody that doesn't work out? Oh, you're the bozo that referred them, right? So the way you address that fear by saying it's our job to hire them. It's your job to tee them up and refer them. Just don't refer so you lose a brother-in-law because your sister wants him out of the house, okay? Come on. and you help train these people on how to be good referees. I kid around. Most of these referral programs don't have enough juice in them to get past that inherent fear. Okay. So $500 is not enough money for people who don't want to put their jobs at risk by referring somebody. I spoke at a material handler in south of Kansas City, big forklift operators they're hiring. And these $18 an hour employees, they were paying a $2,500 sign-up bonus and a $2,500 referral bonus, okay, for $18 an hour employees, because they realized the lost opportunity costs are even greater. A lot of us don't think about the lost opportunity costs when we're hiring somebody. But somebody's there for, I don't care what position you're in, to create an ROI or support an ROI. And if that person's not there to do it, you're going to lose those opportunity dollars, okay? So a lot of people are smart enough to calculate that idea in. But when it comes to referral programs, you train people, you give them QR codes they can share with people. How long does it take for somebody to actually refer somebody to a job? 15 minutes? They can get $2,500 for a 15-minute effort. You know how I'd start marketing that program? How'd you like to make 10 grand an hour? How'd you like to make, you're going to get everybody's attention, 10 grand an hour? Yeah, just refer one person, get the equivalent of 10 grand an hour. All right. The other thing I would do is get out of the cash mindset. So an electric bike might cost $2,500. I would, if we still have the workplace, I'd put electric bike in a lobby and say the next referral gets this bike. Or I'd certainly do it on our internal, with all the remote work, we have to have these internal pages for everybody. I would put in a picture of the bike on the internal page and say, here, whoever gets the net referral gets that bike. Maybe next month it's a trip away for a weekend or something like that. You bring a little fun into the thing and you market it. And then when somebody gets that bike or the $2,500 check, you go print it up this big like somebody just won the lottery, right? And put it on your social media page. You can also extend those referral programs out beyond your employees, to your customers, your clients, your community. Why limit it to just employees? So I think that's the number one way right now to hire anybody is through a robust referral program. You look what you're paying a recruiter. You're paying a recruiter 50% probably of the first year's salary. That 100 grand person is going to cost you 50 grand. Wouldn't it be a lot smarter to pay 5 grand for an employee referral for that person?
Don, what other benefits are there from employees bringing in friends, family, making referrals?
Well, it increases their attention, it increases their engagement, it increases their commitment. Plus that person knows they were referred by that person. It's inherently going to increase all those things on the other person's behalf. I can't quit this place. My buddy just referred me to him. Right.
I'm reminded of one of the Gallup 12 questions. Do I have a best friend at work?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's one reason why we just get new employees. If they don't, we want to assign an orientation or onboarding buddy to them.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, we've moved from attracting to a referral program. I want to come back to maybe a few more ideas regarding the attracting. But once that new employee comes on board, tell us some of your best practices around onboarding.
Yeah. First of all, the realization that most managers hire people to get the process over with. In my languaging, everybody's running 75 miles an hour. I got to stop what I'm doing to go make sure we hire somebody. They're not as valuable as me. So I want to get that over as fast as possible so I can go back to doing my job. All right. And if that's the energy that they hire with, then that person, once they're on board, they're gonna be ignored to a certain degree. It's like getting to somebody to go out on a first date and then you ignore them. Okay, it makes no sense. So I ask people both with their hiring process and the onboarding process to show them to me. And a lot of people go, "What do you mean?" Well, don't you have a process? Yeah. Is it in writing? No. Then you don't have a process. Okay, by definition, right? So I want a hiring process that the managers have to follow. I want an onboarding process that HR and managers have to follow. And, we think of orientation as like, hi, first day, we're here, now get to work. Onboarding is a process that, depending on the job, can last weeks or months. it can last a whole year depending on, high-tech type jobs. A lot of training that has to be done, a lot of cross work that we have to do in the organizations to get fully up to speed. If you're working at retail or fast food chain, it might take 2 weeks to get somebody up to speed. You're working in a large consultancy like a McKinsey, it's going to take you a year to get somebody up to speed. All right. So having it in process, and by the way, there's a lot of tools now I put into the chat, and you guys will get a link to my website that has a ton of tools on it. And one of the tools is an onboarding checklist. Now, one of the things I realized is when I look at all these, I've created a lot of personnel tools, right? So when I looked at all of them, I saw exit interviews, which is you want to know why people left you. Main reason people have exit interviews, they want to make sure they don't get sued, but you still want to make sure you have exit interviews. Then people started saying, hey, why don't we do stay interviews and see how they're doing so they don't leave us, right? That's a great idea. Why stop there? Why don't we do entrance interviews and find out why they decided to work for us in the first place? Wouldn't you like to know that? Hey, nobody said yes to going out with me for a while. I'm curious why you did, okay? All right, so don't you want to know? So I created an exit interview, and, it's 10 categories. You can tweak that stuff and find out what are the 3 main reasons somebody came to go work for you. Over time, you'll start seeing that data shake out, so you'll know in general why people come to work for you. I've seen people, I've seen very clever advertising right off of 101 in Silicon Valley is saying that if you work for us, you'll be getting off the exit right now. So somebody's on a long commute, I got to know another half an hour. Really, I can get off right now and not spend another hour of my life on a highway every day. That might be why that person came to work for you, right? Yeah, well, it might be that they have friends that work there. It might be the type of work that you do. And now you have information that you can use to engage these people. You start to know them. So I want to know why they decided to come to work for me. And then the second thing I'm going to do is have them fill out a getting to know you form. The EEOC says all these things that you can't ask people before they're hired. What's your race? What's your age? What's your family status? What's all these things? But now once they're hired, I do want to know what their family status is. I want to know if they've got an anniversary date. I want to know who their kids are. I want to know what their birthdays are. I want to know as much of that stuff as possible, because you need to show people you care about them, okay? When we're running 75 miles an hour, it's very hard to show people we care about them. And so getting this information up front, the entrance interview and the getting to know you gives you the data that you can start using to come back at people, because one size doesn't fit all, right? How you motivate one person doesn't motivate another person. I will sometimes, it's very interesting, 2 people in the same job. Two people in the same job with the same boss, same company, right? Same everything, same absolutely everything. One's like this and one's not like that. How much does that have to do with the boss? Let's say the boss is treating them equally. There's no discrimination, no harassment, none of that stuff going on. They're treating them equally. That's an inside-out job. That's an inside-out job. And, this whole business about engagement, I'm right there with Abraham Lincoln, who says people are about as happy as they choose to be. I think employees are about as engaged as they choose to be. All right. And so that's one reason why in the hiring process, we really want to find out what motivates people and what demotivates them. So 2 of my favorite questions, and I know you've heard this, Jim, my favorite question of all to ask when I'm hiring somebody, interviewing them, is tell me what felt unfair to you in your last job. Another good dating question. Tell me what felt unfair to you about the last guy. I'm curious. Okay. But the same thing. I first of all, I don't want to hire a victim. And I know eventually something's going to feel unfair to somebody working for me, because it's just too much human being interaction for that not to be the case. Even with good people, things can feel unfair, right? So I want to know how they react to that before I hire them. Do they play victim games? Because if they do, I'm not bringing them into my culture. If we have a no victim culture, then I'm going to find that out in the hiring process. Anything else at that job feel unfair to you? Well, what about the job before that? And I'm going to go through that question. It's amazing. It's the best behavioral interview question you can ask. Okay. On the other side of the spectrum, we interview in the comfortable middle. I like to go out here. The other side of the spectrum is, what were you most excited about in your last job? Why was that exciting to you? Oh man, now I know what I got to do with this person. I got to bring them into a situation similar to like that if they're going to be as productive as I like them to be. Okay. So I want to make sure when I'm hiring people, I'm asking those questions. I'm certainly going to do the skill testing stuff because I don't want to hire somebody who's a failure on day one because I made assumptions about their skill sets instead of testing their skill sets. All right. I also want to know the soft side of them. We do those personality profiles. There's a zillion of them out there. The best one is the one you use, and they can be very complicated. So use one of the simple ones. Getting a 70-page report is useless for everybody. Okay. All right. So I like doing those assessments up front. So we later and those questions up front. So now we know who we're dealing with.
So that gets to the two questions when you're hiring, right? That you have internally. Can they do the job? The skills portion of it. Will they do the job for us? Which are all the other things that you just mentioned.
Yeah. What we're hiring for is trust.
Yeah.
When you can't, the number one thing I talk about is all around control. Control as a leadership style is dead, muerte, no más, no good. Okay. So the catch-22 today is the person you can control is the one you don't want working for you. So you do what I tell you to do, and I'll take care of you. I don't want anybody thinking I'm their daddy. Okay, I'm not playing daddy games or mommy games or anything like that. I'm not out to control you. You need to be able to control yourself. My job is to put you in a position where you are capable of success. Your job is to take advantage of that opportunity.
So again, I'm going to share a rhetorical question to the folks who have joined us today. We found in several of our forum meetings, Don had talked earlier about, everybody's going a million miles an hour. There's no time to do anything. I'm running. One of the unintended consequences of that busyness has been some companies have gone away from an onboarding process. And I'm talking about a process, just as Don had explained earlier, a written, detailed process. They've put it aside because they're just too busy to institute that process. So one of the questions, and again, it's rhetorical now, but this is one of those, uncomfortable in the mirror questions. Has your onboarding process suffered because of either a lack of people that you have to fill the position or busyness or whatever, but kind of file that one away.
We want to create a wow experience. We are an experience economy. I don't care if your clients, your customers, your employees, your spouses, it's an experience economy.
Yes. And I'm going to just call everyone's attention to our comments page. There is a link there that will take you directly to Don's website where all these free tools that he's discussing kind of reside, and you could bring those right into your company immediately. Now we were talking about the Great Resignation. What have you actually seen in all the companies that you visited and the presentations that you've delivered and hearing the feedback from those CEOs? What have you heard from people regarding the Great Resignation?
That they're losing some of their very best people for more money. And that's why I said we have to have that conversation. If you ignore the conversation, it's a mistake, and it's very hard. You can have the most loyal engineer in the world, but if somebody's willing to increase their pay by 25%, they would be stupid and do a disservice to their family not to take that job. Okay. And then the question is, all right, so I've got this lag now of 50 grand, whatever it is. Maybe the reality is that I cannot get to that number. The other reality is maybe that we change the incentive structure with our employees so it's more back-ended, more profit-oriented. You and I are seeing a lot more companies going to ESOPs recently.
Mhm.
I've never seen as many companies going to ESOPs in my whole career, with employee ownership ideas. So if you can't pay them now, they've got to see some kind of reward down the road. If you can't give them the instant gratification, then at least give them the long-term gratification.
Hmm.
And so they are leaving, and you've got everybody. I got a printing client down in Miami. They are paying their workers around those presses $14 an hour. Amazon warehouse came in at $20 an hour next door. Same thing again. And then the catch-22 challenge that we get is now we have to bring somebody in. All right, they didn't want to work at Amazon. They took $18 an hour to come for us. But our existing people are getting paid $14 an hour, and you hope to heck they don't talk to each other, right? The reality of that is not,
Zero.
That,
Zero.
okay?
Yeah.
So now you brought in one person and you upset four of them. Now you got screw that. I'll go to Amazon. So it's a real challenge for everybody. Again, how do we bring people, include them in helping us to solve the problem? We're going to have to charge more. There's going to be a lag before we can bring the cash in. We'll be transparent about where we are with that. And when we hit this benchmark, we'll do this. When we hit this benchmark, we'll do that. So at least they know you're being transparent and trying to do something about it.
Other than compensation, what else are you hearing? What other things are leading people to reconsider moving companies, leaving the company that they're in?
The number two thing, comps number one, always will be, always has been. We had one of our speakers come in our group. He said base compensation is still number one. What you get paid today, all right? That's still, regardless of all the other things you can do, what you get paid today is always going to be number one. Now, number two in our economy is flexibility. In large part because of that overwhelm. My work and home life have gotten so blended. Don't tell me when I have to do either one. Let me decide when I can best manage either one. All right. It may not be that it makes sense for me to work middle of the day when I got kids. I'm better off starting work at 8 and going to 11 and working around my kid's situation. Otherwise, you're going to force me to quit and just stay home. So there's flexibility is the big deal, combined with the business of coming back to work. So that's been a real challenge for everybody. The owners, a lot of them put so much effort and energy into creating a great work environment. They even might have bought a building themselves. They spend $1 million on making sure it's decorated, well branded, all that kind of stuff. Or they got a 5-year lease, and all of a sudden nobody wants to come in. And it's a real frustration for these owners. You look at what Musk did. He goes, you're going to come in. If you don't want to work for me, then go work someplace else, right? And he's going to lose some talent over it. The question is, will he be able to replace that talent with equivalent talent who wants to come to work? And who knows the answer to that? There's got to be a lot of data to test that theory, So, but that's most of this come back to work thing right now is a personal preference on the part of the owner. Now, what I've been sharing with those owners is when you have people come into work is that's when they can be most productive. Work for many people is nothing more than a constant distraction. Hey, you got a minute, ping pong. Hey, you want to play ping pong? Whatever it is, all right? It's a constant distraction. And we know a lot of people do much better when they're just being able to focus without that distraction. So they have found a lot of people are more productive at home than coming into work. All right, especially the more introverted type people dealing with more data, an underwriter who they don't need to talk to anybody. They're just going to do the work, right? Why do they need to do it in the office? Now, if you got a construction firm and you got those big blueprints laid out on the table, how are you going to do that remotely? Every guy kind of put their phone up there. So you do all that work going over things and talking about things. And then when you have to do the CAD drawings, you can do that back at your house. Okay. So when we want to require people to come in, require is the word, require people to come in is when we can do our work best that way. And we eventually want people to come in so that we can connect. So some companies are saying, look, can you at least come in 2 days a week? All right. We'll let you we'll keep. Interestingly, one of the companies said, I want everybody in Monday morning. I want everybody in Monday morning. A lot of companies say we're not going to do Mondays and Fridays. And again, there is no right answer right now. There is no right. This is the thing. There is no right answer. This is one enormous experiment. And if you don't test different things, you'll never figure out the best way.
Yeah, we've had numerous discussions about the future of work, and I'm going to get your opinion on that as well. One thing we did share with the CEOs in our groups was just to examine your workforce. And we broke that workforce. I wish I could take credit for this. I can't. We read this somewhere else. Workplace denizens. If you're a waiter, if you work in a hotel, if you're in construction, if you're in manufacturing, you can't do the work remotely. You have to be at work to do the work. Workplace denizens. Then they defined enthusiasts. These are people who either don't have the physical ability to do work at home. They don't have a separate room. They're fighting their kids for bandwidth, whatever it is. Or they just like being at work. Those are the enthusiasts. Then there's the citizens. Those are the folks that, hey, you know what? I'm okay coming into work, but I'm okay working from home too. So you're figuring out that balance that Don was talking about earlier. Is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? Is it 1 day a week where everybody comes in? And then finally, the true digital nomads. We don't know what they do. We don't know how they do it. They somehow get it done, and they can do it locked up in a closet.
And I don't even know where they are in the world, right?
And they could be doing it in Bangladesh, right? Or anywhere in the planet. So just examining your workforce and determining what part of your workforce falls into one of those 4 categories is a good start as you figure out the future of work. But we're going to get a little help from Don. What are you seeing as sort of, and I know there's many industries and we can paint with many different brushes, but what has your thinking been on the future of work?
I've done a big deep dive into it. One thing I really studied was what the impact of robotics and AI will be. So I did a deep dive for 3 years into that. First of all, it's going back to my conversation around the leaders. A lot of this is personal choice and preference and belief systems. Okay. So if that CEO has a belief system, everybody's got to come into work. So he's going to fight some reality out there. So one of the first things we need to do is to really question our belief systems. First of all, identify what our belief system is, and then say, does that make sense to have that belief system in this economy? Because it may not. Okay. I do like being around people. I'm a people person. I like that, even if I'm not distractive of them, I just like community around me, right? As you mentioned, D. Hock, who started Visa, said it's very hard to build a community remotely. Okay. Yeah. So I like that community around me. Now, there's reality that some of the community is not going to be around me. And what I've seen some companies do is create pods. So let's say you're a California-based company, but you got a 30-year workforce in Austin. Well, we're going to have them do meetups in Austin. And if they're in New York, they're going to have meetups in New York. So that idea of pods, PODS, and I'm going to make sure that we all get together at least once or twice a year. That's what I've seen a lot of people do in that environment. But we're going to see even more and more remote work going on. These tools, what we're dealing with now and the Zooms and all of those, that's just the beginning of this. That's just the beginning of this. We're going to be in virtual rooms sooner or later, with not just big, heavy things on our heads, but very light things on our heads, like sunglasses, looking at people, and we're in a virtual room together. You can almost feel like you're shaking hands with them. So the technology is really going to move forward quickly to support more of this remote hybrid type work. We're just at the beginning of that curve. Well, also, because of that shortage of employees, we're going to bring in a lot more AI. One of the companies I just spoke for does an amazing job of customer service with AI. You know how hard it is to get customer service people? And we're going back to that Turing test, Turing, the guy kind of invented computers. And the Turing test is when you don't realize you're speaking to AI. All right. And in some applications, the old ones, you remember, nice bot you sent me, I wanted to talk to a person, not a computer. You're saying the answers just don't make sense. Well, now the answers are getting a lot better, the self-learning of these computers. So you're going to have that, and you're going to have the robotics. I mean, you've got everything from a tool that makes, 500 hamburgers an hour You know, who needs, if you can't hire people to work at McDonald's, you're going to do that. Look at all, you go to McDonald's, see all the big kiosks in the front. You go to Chili's, you get a kiosk at the table instead of a waiter. So you're going to see more and more robotics and AI replacing people at a faster and faster rate because the demand is enormous. One of the robots is Baxter. That thing basically runs at $4 an hour total cost, purchase, and maintenance, and replaces a $20, $25 employee who may or may not show up, may get injured, may cause a problem, may split anytime they feel like it. You know, what would you rather have, the robot or that? Yeah. You know, and it's coming all over the place. I spoke at a conference for cleaning companies, industrial cleaning, going into offices and factories and stuff. All the robotic cleaning tools coming out. We have Brain Corp here in San Diego as an example. They clean shopping aisles, right? And so you don't have anybody mopping a shopping aisle anymore. You know, they just send the robots out. So the future of work is going to continue to be more technology on one side and more flat out service on the other side, which is one reason why we're having these separations in wealth, which are going to continue on.
So we touched on the Great Resignation. As you and I were preparing for today's Expert Insights program, I had shared with you the Great Reconnection. So here's someone taking a different view, and we touched on that, getting people back and reconnecting after having been remote for the better part of 2 years. Let's share your thoughts on that.
It's interesting. I just did a number of programs on mental health because mental health is a real issue right now. Speaking to these CEO groups, you know, they rate them like we rate them. I don't know what's going on in your group, Jim, but the personal relationships are falling apart all over the place. You know, the business might be doing well, you know, but they ask, how's your health? You find your business, and health is fine. Relationships at a scale of 10, 4, 5, 6, I saw a ton of that. All right. So this has been very stressful for everybody. For some people, from a mental health standpoint, they just shut down in a sense, wanted to go in their cave and work from there. But as my HR group said, you know, I can't be at home all the time. That's not good for my mental health either. I think I have felt the stress between my wife and I being around each other nonstop for 2.5 years when we only, you know, got to see each other in the evening. You know, we didn't tire of each other, you know. So you see more and more of that happening. And so from a mental health standpoint, I think we need some balance and some interaction. I just think people need that. All right. They're mistaken to think that, oh, I don't need that. You're right, until you're completely depressed by yourself, right? So we do need that. And how are you going to be creative? You know, the way out of being stuck is through creativity. And you don't want to be creative by yourself. So this is something where you have the real opportunity. For example, go back to the hiring. Today, everybody at the company has a role in hiring. Everybody. We're all hiring at this company, all right? And we're all trying to bring good vibes to this company and good juju and all good stuff to this company. We're all responsible for that. So please, let's be inclusive of everybody in that process and don't think the idea just has to come top down. You know, be inclusive. Ask people, what do you need? What do you want? How can we help you? How can we support you? We have two ideas. Why don't you vote on the one you'd rather see us do? You know, that type of thing. I think the number one thing is to be inclusive of people.
Don, before we move to questions, again, I want to just remind everyone that there is a link to Don's website for some of these tools, but I wanted to discuss one tool before we pick up some of the questions, and that was the cost of turnover. Again, I've found over, you know, in 25 years plus of doing this work, I've rarely run into a company that has overestimated the cost of their turnover. In many cases, they've underestimated it, and in some cases by a factor of 10 or 20 times. Let's talk about your take on the cost.
So one of the things that we're generally poor about is math around HR. Nobody gets into HR to know math. It's just the reality of it. Now, some people might have come out of an accounting background and gone into HR and they know the math better. But for the most part, even business owners don't know the math around HR. And it's one of the things I really like to teach. So when I ran a previous HR group, the first thing I did was a turnover cost calculator. That tool is on that free link. And then I had 15 top-end HR executives look at it and say what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what numbers are missing. And then we tweak that thing. And I said, look, let's take a midpoint salary. Let's call it 50 grand, all right? And go back to your company, run the calculator, and tell me what it costs to replace the typical $50,000 employee. And the number that came back, the average from the 15 people was $54,000, okay? And so, and half of that was hard costs. We have to run an ad again. The other half was soft costs, the stress on customers and employees and all that type of stuff. So it's about one-to-one. And remember, turnover can be contagious. You know, you lose a team project manager, might take the whole team with them, right? And all of a sudden, you don't just lose one person, you lost the whole team. So and plus turnover is often associated with lawsuits too. So we really want it. There's a lot of ancillary expense to turnover, but the way to think about it is on a sliding scale. The one-to-one, get that in there. The one-to-one is at about $50,000. So if you've got somebody in fast food that you're paying, $14 an hour, 28 grand a year, it's not taking you 28 grand to replace them, like 2 weeks of salary, right? But if you're hiring a 100 grand engineer and you've got an enormous learning curve, it might cost 150 grand to replace them. Or if they took a team with them, even more than that. And some of that turnover is healthy. We need to cull the herd. We need to let go of poor performers. I think everybody's afraid to do that right now. They'd rather have somebody than nobody, which I don't know if that's what you really want. But the cost of that turnover is at least one-to-one of 50 grand. It goes up from there. Now, I have never met a business owner, never met a CEO that's more motivated by cost than revenue. Have you, Jim? I don't want to work for that CEO, right? Okay. So if you make a poor hire or you lose somebody, and I'll just use a simple number, it costs you 50 grand. That 50 grand came right out of your pocket. Everybody on this thing's a private company, came right out of ownership's pocket. Nobody else at your pocket, right? Now you've got to bring in new income or cut expenses at 50 grand. So most of us are running pretty lean, whereas HR are going to cut expenses at 50 grand. So what we really need to do is to replace that revenue. And I spoke at 2 CPA conferences, and the closest languaging I can get to that is marginal replacement revenue. Okay. What do we have to bring top of the line with all the fixed assets we have to put that 50 grand back in our pocket? And they told me most conservatively, it's a 4-to-1 figure. You've got the cost of sales, you've got the cost of marketing, you've got the cost of implementation, you got your taxes, you got your commissions, all those things that come out of that sale. And so it's margin at least 4-to-1. So that $50,000 problem, now the equivalent of 200 to 250 in sales in your organization. So every HR problem becomes a sales problem. Now you take that 250 you have to bring in. If you're an auto dealer, as we know, they put about $500 per car sold in their pocket. You go and a lot and say, how many cars you're going to have to sell? To put that money back in your pocket, that 50 grand back in your pocket. Now all of a sudden, it's very visceral, that expense. Before it was hey, we lost another employee. I know it cost me something. Not, Jesus Christ, it just cost me 100 cars on a parking lot. That's a different connection to it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the values of the tools is to take it from something that you feel to something you can look at and then figure out the sales side of it in terms of replacement.
But a couple of questions I want to... Jim, I want my managers to know that ratio. I want them to really understand that, look, an average physician gets $50 per patient, okay, after all the medical stuff around it. They lose a medical assistant, 50 grand medical assistant. That's 1,000 patients.
Yeah. That's a lot of work. Let's hit a couple of these questions. Even though, according to the Federal Reserve Board chair, we're not in a recession yet. How address the pressure on compensation from employees in face of a pending recession? Because as we know, in some of the examples we used before, where I've raised that employee from $14 to $18, if we hit a recession, I can't go back to that employee and go, hey, you're back at $14 again. So tell us a little bit about how to approach that.
Well, that's one reason why we have to have the big conversation. And every one of the CEOs that I've dealt with right now is very concerned about their tea leaves. A lot of their orders have slowed down already, and because people got to watch, overdoing things in a sense. So there's been some pullback, and I know your groups feel that too, Jim. And that's why we have to have the conversation of why we're doing what we're doing with our compensation ranges. And I think just by nature, we're going to see more variable pay. It might be hard to do that with the entry-level employee at a fast food place. Hey, they're not going to be at that job for more than 3 months anyway, right? So variable pay down the road is meaningless. What they get paid today means everything. And I think if you have to adjust your wage down, that's because everybody else has to adjust their wage down. So the marketplace still determines what a fair day's wage is. And we want to have the conversation of what we're going to try to do is at least be at the market rate, a little bit below it. But listen, if we're paying $16 an hour now, and that's at market rate, but we hit a recession and market rate goes down to $14 an hour, then we're going to have no choice but to lower those fees unless any of you come up with a brainstorm how we can make enough money to keep those $16 an hour wages. Because I don't see how else you're going to get around it. Yeah. I think we have to be, it's one reason they talk a lot about transparency and leadership today. I think we have to really be transparent leaders today.
Okay. And we also had a question about the referral bonuses.
Yeah, I saw that. And so you have to look at the job. Okay. You have to look at, so if somebody's in fast food where the average retention is less than 6 months, are you going to wait till somebody works for a year? No, you're going to pay them today, and you're going to pay them if they're still there in 30 days, and maybe if they're there in 90 days, right? If it's an engineer, you may pay immediately, you may pay 6 months, you may pay a year. So I wouldn't pay more than a year out. Interestingly, one of my clients is in a sales organization, and he is giving a 5% override on anybody referred. So I get 5% of that guy's sales in perpetuity, as long as they're working there. Then you refer 5 people, you get a nice extra bonus check every month.
If any of our viewers have additional questions, please put them in the comments now, and we'll address as many as we can before we wrap up today.
And by the way, Shannon, I agree with your comment about peer groups and coaches are amazing to help leaders. They're also amazing to help retain employees. Okay. If it's good for us, it's good for them too. You don't have to spend the same kind of money, but the same kind of thinking might be more group coaching or peer groups or something like that. Also internally, and just somebody doing some coaching instead of no coaching.
All right, I'm going to challenge our viewers. Would like to have them just write into the comments section what your number one takeaway was. I've got quite a few of them myself. The one that really struck me today, and again, it's like watching a good movie, right? You watch the movie a third or fourth time, you always pick up something new. So this is probably my third or fourth time listening to Don's presentation. First time today that I really twigged on the entrance interview and getting the reason why they joined you. That was really good. Just throw it into chat, and we'll see what, or into the comments section. We'll see what else. The 3 videos from.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. 3
and by
videos.
the way, if you've got any crazy cool thing that you've been doing that hasn't been, throw that in there.
Yeah,
too.
Throw that in there.
None of us are smart as all of us.
Yep. Mike Kleiss, I like to join interviews. Way to go, Mike. I agree 100%.
Yeah. Why did you decide to go out with me? I'm just curious.
Yeah. And overcoming the referral fears.
Yes, Mark. Get your marketing folks and HR should have a relationship with marketing around branding, and it should have a relationship with CFO around understanding the numbers.
Good stuff.
The importance of the onboarding experience. Yes, with experience being the word. A wow onboarding experience. You know, I've only heard too many stories of horrible onboarding experiences, showing up for work and nobody there to deal with you because they're so busy doing something and leaving and saying, I'm not coming back to this place. Really, today, if you do that to somebody, they've got 3 job offers. See ya.
They're gone.
Yeah, gone.
They're gone before lunch. Yep. Yeah. We have calculating the cost of separation and turnover as a big takeaway.
And again, you'll get that Excel spreadsheet. There's also an Excel spreadsheet called Retention Program Possibilities that helps you think through the math of spending dollars on employees in order to retain them. Okay, so you'll see it's the cost, ease, and impact formula spread out for 4 days with a bunch of different ideas. So take a look at the Retention Program Possibilities as well.
So last month's speaker,
Chip.
Yep, Chip Conley. When he was running Joie de Vivre Hospitality, he had a sheet that he had new employees fill out, and you reminded me of that in the getting to know you sheet. And some of the questions that he had were kind of so simple and so remarkable and got so much payback that it was amazing. One was, what's your favorite candy bar? Right? Imagine coming into work one day and your favorite candy bar is sitting there with a little, hey, well done.
Team, and you got a T-shirt from them. Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll have the Yankees Mets discussion.
By the way, one of the things I had somebody do, and I know we're getting close to time, but I think this is a great idea for all of you, especially there's a lot of hybrid and remote work. Have a T-shirt contest, okay? And in that T-shirt contest, you're going to have 3 winners, and we're going to talk about T-shirts related to the values and who the company is. And you can get them in 3 different colors with 3 different messages. You send them out to employees, and now they're showing up on their meetings with the messaging and the cool T-shirts. Nice. And, but my rule around any company swag, it has to be cool enough that people want to wear it outside of the workplace.
Outside the company.
Yep.
We had a couple more comments. Know the sales equivalent of turnover. That does get the CEO's attention. And the least expensive retention tools are often the most expensive. We just kind of talked a little bit about
like a written thank you note. Like a written thank you note.
Yeah, really. It takes a couple minutes. All right, we are love clothes and branded stuff. I'm big on the we used to call them graven images or swag. I love swag.
Just make sure when you buy those polo shirts, after one wash, they don't come up to your navel. Okay,
that's it. Buy the good stuff. Don, thank you very much. I'm sure that our participants today have walked away with a couple of huge takeaways. Again, you can find those tools on Don's website, and we will see everyone next month. Thank you.
All right, have a great week. Thank you.